You have every honor that a man could have. You've got
Almost.
Oscars.
No.
No Oscar?
No Oscars. I got the Irving
Then why are they
Thalberg
giving
Award.
you this award then if you don't have an Oscar?
I don't have anything. I don't really have a lot of awards, to be very honest with you. I have the Irving Thalberg Award, and you know, and I get a lot of little awards.
Yeah.
I've got 2 Emmys, but I've never had an Academy Award. I've been nominated, but I've never won. I'm too popular for that.
Too popular. Meaning what?
They don't give Academy Awards to popular films.
Are you proud of the fact that you make films that people want to go see?
Yeah.
So
I believe
popular's okay with you.
popular is okay with me. I think it's a very important part of society. And if you're making a work of art or a film or whatever and nobody sees it, I don't see where it does anybody any good. What I wanted to do, and what a lot of the people wanted to do, was simply make films that people liked and enlighten them, entertain them. And that's what we were in the business for. We liked movies.
So what does Star Wars and Indiana Jones say about the world you want to create?
Well, Star Wars and Indiana Jones were basically put together, especially Star Wars, more than Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones was just done for fun, to entertain people. And there were some messages in there about, you know, archaeology and also about what we believe in terms of myths and that sort of thing. But the real one is Star Wars, and that was done in the same vein that what I was saying about the patron creates the propaganda, and what I wanted to do was go back to some of the older propaganda, which was consistent through all of the societies, which is mythology, but to say, what did they all believe? Because they were all, this propaganda was created independently.
Yeah.
And what are the things that they all actually believed? We're talking relationships with your father, relationships with your society, your history, relationships with the gods. All of this stuff it's old, but they're psychological motifs that were created through storytelling, primarily oral storytelling, that explained what they believed in and who they believed in. So what I wanted to do is go back and find the psychological motifs that underlie that, because those grow out of popularism, and to say that not all, but a majority of people, boys, have a certain psychological relationship with their fathers. And that's been going on through history, and trying to explain that, to say, we know your darkest secret.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're part of us, because we all know the same things. We know what you're thinking about your mother. We know what you think about your brother. We know what you think about your father, really.
Yeah.
And those are the things that make people say, hey, this is why we believe this stuff. And again, the crudest part of that, in terms of the religious, spiritual thing, is some people have taken those ideas and then distorted them, and you end up in a cult where they're using the psychological tools to make you adhere to their society, and part of it is they have to keep it closed.
And to them.
And to them, but it's the same thing. I mean, and again, you go through history, you know, and even though in most cases you had open societies, but they really weren't, because let's face it, you were going to get killed if you go outside the wall, so let's build a wall around the whole thing so we can defend ourselves. So they were self-fulfilling, you know, isolated human events. You know, that was my environment that I grew up in, and I was perfectly happy to do it. I did not want to make theatrical films. I was making kind of tone poems in school. I was winning awards. Francis and I moved to San Francisco because neither one of us liked the Hollywood environment. We started a company up here, and I got to take one of my student films and turn it into a feature, which was, it was
VHS.
But it was a tone poem. It was just a visual storytelling. You know, the characters and the plot were not as important as the metaphor and the symbolism. And as a result, and the emotional connection between the moving image and the audience. So I did that, and obviously our company went bankrupt and I destroyed everything. But like there's always a silver lining, you know. It caused him to be forced to pay off the debts, which meant he had to go do The Godfather. He challenged me as he was walking out the door. He says, "Stop doing this artsy-fartsy stuff.
Yeah.
Make a movie, make a comedy. I dare you to make a comedy." And I said, "Well, I can do that.
Yes.
That's no big deal. I can do anything. You know, I'm in my 20s.
I'm George Lucas.
No, it's not. It has nothing to do with George
No, I
Lucas. It
know.
has to do with I'm 23. I can do anything. You know, that's when you think it. By the time
Right.
30, you get that beaten out of you. But when you're young, you sort of think you can do anything. And so I did it, and that was successful, and that started me on a whole different train to do again. When I did started Star Wars, I certainly didn't think it was going to be a hit. I didn't think American Graffiti was going to be a hit. I had no idea. I mean, in the beginning, American Graffiti was, the studio hated the film so much they shelved it. And they said, we're not going to even release this. Maybe we're going to see if we can release it as a movie of the week. But we can't release it in theaters. It's not that good. So that's where I was. And then I started working on Star Wars. And I was just doing it because I needed a job to pay, you know, to eat. And I wanted to do this kind of experimental-ish, in my mind, idea about mythology and take the films that I loved when I was young, which was Republic serials, and transform, you know, the kind of movie I wanted to make into a very popular genre. And out of that came both Indiana Jones and Star Wars. But, you know, I thought that was my last movie of this thing. Then I was going to go back to doing what I really wanted to do. And I said, you know, at least at the end, I want to have done a old-fashioned movie, you know, on sound stages with makeup people and, you know, sets and, you know,
Yeah.
do the thing, make one of those movies before I'm kicked out. And, you know, the fluke of American Graffiti becoming a hit was like, oh my God, now what? But I guess that'll be the only time that'll ever happen. So I got a hit. So I'll make this movie, which probably won't be a hit, but
Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars. But you
Yeah.
know, when you describe Star Wars, you say it's a space opera. It's not a science fiction film. You know, we have large dogs flying spaceships, and you know, you describe it, and people will say, "Oh dear, this guy's off." You know,
He's in his own world.
and of course, most of my friends are of the where I was persuasion. I was further into the art world than they were, but I threw that all away after American Graffiti. I mean, Graffiti was again. I mean, nobody expected me to do a comedy based on THX.
Yes.
So I said, I can, and I'm not that funny a guy in real life.
I'll show Francis I can do a comedy.
I'll show those guys.
Yes.
And then, but then when I started to go into Star Wars, they said, why are you making a children's film? I said, well, because I think I can have more of an influence on people. And I think I can have things to say that I can actually influence kids, you know, adolescents, 12-year-olds. And, you know, that are trying to make their way into the bigger world. And that's basically what mythology was to say, I'm saying, this is what we believe in, these are our rules, this is what we are as a society. And we don't do that. The last time we were doing that was Westerns. And of course, this was in the 70s, and the Westerns sort of fiddled out in the 50s. So it's like we didn't have any national mythology. So I said, I want to try this and see if it works. And I'm just doing it, you know. And it'd be fun because, you know, I like spaceships, I like adventure, I like fun, I like all this stuff. So I'll do it. But I figured that would be the last. I'll do it, I'll have done my thing. Then I got in trouble because the script got out too long, and then I had 3 scripts instead of 1 script, and then I had to try to get them all finished. And,
Yeah.
you know, I got hooked into this tar baby, and I couldn't get out. And it was a while before I finally realized that no matter what happens, I'm never going to get out. I'm always going to be George Star Wars Lucas, no matter how hard I try to be something else.
Just think about the career. Whenever you decide that there are no more movies to be made by George Lucas, and you look back at a body of work, are you going to say, Star Wars was my crowning achievement, cinematically?
Cinematically, I'd say probably yes.
Yes, okay. In what way is it not your crowning achievement?
I don't know. Again, it's hard to, I have a pretty low opinion of my movies. So to me, I've always said, well, these didn't really turn out the way I'd hoped they would. And, and I can see all the flaws and I can see all the stuff. I mean, American Graffiti is the most fun movie I made in terms of what I created. The most fun movie to work on was Indiana Jones because I didn't have to direct it.
Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, I had the best director in the world. It turned out better. That was the one where everything went right, which happens very rarely in real life. But it just gets better and better and better, and you just can't believe how wonderful it turns out. The other ones you suffer through, and you think they're terrible, and then people say, oh, they're great. But it's hard to get that they're actually terrible, because I can see all the Scotch tape and the rubber bands and everything holding it together. And it was just particularly true of Star Wars #4, because, it barely got made. And I was so disappointed about what my vision was and what it actually turned out to be. And I complained about it a lot right after the movie when, in the interviews you see that I said, it came out to be 35% of what I wanted and all this kind of stuff. But I did have a vision, but my vision was way beyond what was possible. And I did the best I could. And then after a lot of people said, well, this is the greatest movie of all time, you have to, and I said, well, okay, maybe it's pretty good. And we'll live with that. And then part of it then was to continue the story. It was just a thing to finish the story. And then after that, I worked on the technology, and I said, well, gee, now I can tell the backstory, because the backstory seems to have gotten lost. When it was one movie, it was much easier to see the backstory of Darth Vader, because it was only one
But didn't
movie.
you intend to, in the beginning, create really 3 movies when you started? And then you decided only to take one part of that life story.
Yeah, I took the first act.
Exactly.
And
There
then
were 3 acts, and you took the first.
Yeah, but then the first act didn't really work. So I said, okay, what I'm going to have to do is take the ending of the 3rd film and put it on the 1st film. Which you do. You've got a bunch of stuff sitting on your desk as you're creating it. So, well, let me take that and stick that in here and make it. So I wasn't worried that much about the sequels when I was actually making it, because I have to make this the best film. Because I want this one to succeed and work. So then when I moved on to the other ones, I said, well, gee, Ben Kenobi is now dead. I killed him. Or that was unfortunate. How am I going to fix that? And what am I going to do about the fact that I already blew the Death Star up? And that's what the ending is. And so I went through, and so the story stretched itself and moved around. It is a creative process where you're kind of doing things and you maneuver through your imagination. But part of it was simply, when I got down to some of the other movies, I was able to create an environment and a world that wasn't possible when I started the first one. So to me, a lot of the things were just technical, or, in the end, getting Yoda to do a sword fight, which I'd always wanted to do, but I could never do it, because he was a Muppet.
You said famously, Flash Gordon was the inspiration and the Bible.
Well, it wasn't the Bible by a long shot. It was the inspiration. But at the same time with Flash Gordon, it was better. I knew I wanted to make a movie based on those serials, but I didn't, it wasn't going to be Flash Gordon. So I did try to get the rights to Flash Gordon, couldn't, but that was good. Because if I had, it would have set me off on a funny thing. But because I realized after I didn't get it, I said, well, I really don't want Flash Gordon. I don't want to do I want a space opera that's like Flash Gordon. But if I were making that movie, I would probably take Flash Gordon out of it, and I'd take all that stuff, Mongo and all that stuff. I don't want to do that stuff. Because what I really wanted to do was more on the lines of Star Wars and less on the lines of Flash Gordon. There is a similarity between the two, but there is definitely a difference in perspective about how they're doing. So that sent me in the right direction of having to think up something completely new, but inspired of course inspired by Westerns. And people go through and say, these are all the inspirations that were influenced Star Wars. And they are. Just like whether you're a writer, no matter what, you're a painter, whether you're a politician, in theory, you have steeped yourself in the genre you're working in. and you know all the various kinds of things, and you can pull the best parts of what you know, of what you learned in theory, you know, but, you know, it works everywhere except it seems in politics, because they are doomed to repeat themselves every few years because they do not listen to history.
Where did the idea of force come from?
The whole thing in Star Wars was to take, again, ideas, psychological ideas, from social issues, political issues, spiritual issues, and condense them down into an easy to tell story of those stories. The Force basically came from, you know, distilling all of the religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, go all around the world, all through time, finding the similarities, and then creating an easy to deal with metaphor for what religion is. And the point is that I mean, in the very beginning, when you have people worshiping rocks and deer, they called it life force. They called it the Force. Right. That's what it was. And so where did the name come from? It came from basically life force, of what the more primitive religions believed in. And then you go through all the other religions, and they have the same thing. You know, it's all the same. You know, whether you believe in God, don't believe in God, believe in religion, don't believe in religion. The issue is that you either don't believe there's anything else out there, which is a little, I think, would be hard to live with at the same time. I mean, I believe something's out there, I just don't know what it is. I have no idea, or would I dare to guess, but I do know that religions aren't based on it. They're human psychological needs that have been put together mostly to create a society.
But you believe something's out there.
Yeah.
So here's what's interesting to me about Star Wars 2. I mean, to hear you talk about it, this was a very personal film.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah, well, all my films are personal because I thought them up, I did them, and you can say, well, but Star Wars is just for a kiddies movie. I said, you know, the idea of making it for kids, the idea that it was a fun kiddie movie, all that stuff was very important to me. I like that sort of thing, and I like Star Wars. And I did it not because I thought it was going to make any money, because, as I say, in the end, we finished it, we showed it to the board of directors of Fox, and they hated it. And I had an ally at the head of the studio, and he fought for me and got it through there, but, you know, nobody thought it was going to be a hit, especially me.
Okay, so personal film becomes among other things, a blockbuster.
Right, well, and again, it was the second time, because American Graffiti was a very personal film.
And also, Star Wars became a cultural mainstay, as we've said. And here's what Steven said. He said, it is the moment in which the entire industry changed. Star Wars is the moment when the industry changed.
Well, it changed for the good and for the bad.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's again, when you invent things, well, you don't invent things, I don't know, but when you bring new things into a society, you can either, it's like the balance of the Force. Yeah. You can either use it for good or you can use it for evil. And what happens when there's something new, people have a tendency to overdo it. They abuse it. Now, there were two things that got abused with Star Wars, and still being abused. One, when Star Wars came out, everybody said, oh, it's a silly movie, it's just a bunch of space battles and stuff. It's not real. There's nothing behind it. And I said, well, there is stuff behind it. It's not just a space battle. There's more to it than that. It's much, much more complicated than that. But nobody would listen. So they just said, oh, well, it's simple, and we like the spaceships, we like the stuff. So they said, fine. So the spaceships and that part of the science, fantasy, whatever, got terribly abused. And of course, everybody went out and made spaceship movies. And they were all horrible, and they all lost tons of money.
Taken these old, ancient stories and projected them out beyond our imagination. And that's genius.